Hi, Dr. Randy here from my home again today. And as I promised, I want to talk about money, the power of money, and how to be intentional with money. And what do you do when you disagree about money? And right now, some money issues are on the rise for many families because of the unemployment and the shuttering of many businesses and the cutback in hours. It could be a real stress point that you have in your home and in your family. So, what do you do when you disagree about money? Money is an emotional topic. And how you handle your money reflects your values, your goals, your hopes, and your dreams for the future. And money in a marriage can either be a point of great intimacy and closeness, or it can be a point of great pain in the relationship. And we find that couples that are intentionally following what we teach here of the 10-10-80, and I'll talk about that more in a moment, 10-10-80 principle, are happier and less stressed and closer. Money's a big topic. It's a big issue. And when we teach this life principle, LIFE, it works beautifully for those money issues that can pop up in a marriage and a family. And if you're not acquainted with what those letters stand for, the letter L stands for loving God and then locking in on a God-intended goal for your money. What is God's intention for your money? That we not be a servant to money, that we not worship money. Money is a tool. It comes, it goes. We can't take it with us. There's no U-Haul behind a hearse, as I've heard it said. It's something we use while we're alive, and if we have any left over, to pass it on to the next generation for them to use or potentially misuse moving forward. So money is a gift from God, and how we use it really does matter. And so, to the extent that we can, to see money for what it is. Money is a tool, and when we don't agree on money, it creates tension in marriages. Marriage counselors will tell you one of the major issues that show up in counseling is when parents or a husband and wife disagree on money. And that's why it's so important to get on the same page. Maybe you grew up in a home where money was never talked about. You never learned how to deal with money. And now that you're married, you don't know how to deal with it now either. And it's something you can learn to do. There are principles that can be followed. As I mentioned, we teach the 10-10-80, which is a very basic philosophy of money. And if you follow the 10-10-80 for a lifetime, it will change your life. It'll change how you view money. It'll change the outcome of your money. It's simply this. To follow God's intention, the first 10% is set aside as a tithe. That we're giving back to God what He's already given to us, and to be intentional in doing that. And maybe you're saying, Randy, there's no way I can do that right now. Well, step out to the degree that you can, the faith that you have today. If you start with 1%, start with 1%. If you start with 2, start with 2, but be intentional. Otherwise, what will happen is it'll never happen. And the other 10% is to set aside for you. You pay yourself, as it were. You're setting aside for the future, for retirement, for savings. Of course, the first part should be for an emergency fund. We've always recommended 3 to 6 months to be set aside, that you have liquidity, cash available if needed, like right now with a loss of a job, for instance, or some emergency that comes up, that you have that money set aside for those reasons. And that's an important thing to do. You're paying yourself that 10%. So 10% set aside as a tithe, 10% set aside for yourself. And let me just add, if you're later in life, maybe you're already in your 30s, late 30s or 40s, and you're not saved a dime, if you can, start saving and get it up to at least 15%. So that when you get to be older, when you get to be near retirement age, it'll be amazing. You run the numbers. Just find a calculator that does compounding interest on what a standard amount going in, a set amount going in every week or every month will add up to over 20, 30, or 40 years. It's amazing what those numbers will look like. And so I encourage you to do that. And what we're actually saying then is you learn to live on 80%. See, the research is very clear. What we tend to do in our culture is we live right up to the 100% of whatever we make. So if you make a lot, people tend to spend a lot. If you make less, you tend to spend it all, but just less. And if we can be intentional to start setting aside that 20%, a tithe in savings, and learning to live on 80%. Now, you may say, hey, I'm out of a job right now, Randy. My business that I work with has been shuttered. I'm on unemployment. I don't know if we're going to get back to work. Well, obviously, when you're going through a time like this, that's why we teach 10-10-80, because people who have prepared 10 years ago, setting aside an emergency fund and so on, are now able to get through this time more easily than those who did not prepare. So use this as a reminder to say, hey, when we get out of this pandemic, beyond this COVID-19, and you get back to work, and it's coming, it's going to happen, I'm optimistic that you say, hey, we're going to leave this experience and come out on the other side with some new attitudes and new behaviors about money. But again, it still comes back to you and your spouse agreeing on money. If you've never put a budget together, and I know a lot of people hate the B word, budget. It could be called a spending plan or whatever you want to call it. But it's as simple as saying, here's what we spend in an average month. Look at your credit card slips or look at your receipts. Keep record of what you spend in a typical 30 days, and that'll give you an idea what your budget is. And then set aside what your income is and look at the difference. And if it's not adding up, you only have one of two choices. You either cut the expenses or you increase the income or do both. But to put a budget together and then very intentionally follow that budget. And if you're intentional at setting aside the savings first and it's gone so you can't spend it, you're more likely to save. My wife, Donna, and I, when we first got married, we were teenagers, 18 and 19. And from the very first day at work, I had my paycheck set aside just a little bit. I don't remember how much, but a very, very tiny amount as a discipline, taken right out of the check, put right into savings. And over the years, we've continued to do that until this stage in our life. And in a process, that compounding interest has allowed us to feel more secure about our finances today. And so it begins by doing a little bit over an extended period of time, because if you bring it home and you have it, you're more likely to spend it. That's why if you do it in advance, have it taken out, at least that worked for my wife, Donna, and I. And I think it might be something that could work for you and your spouse as well. But no matter what your plan is, there's great plans. There's people who have books and tapes and radio shows and TV shows and lots of things you can read about, and most of these plans will work, and there's some plans that make more sense than others, but what makes sense to you? That's why we have the 10-10-80 plan. Very simple. Tithe, save at least 10%, and just learn to live on the remainder. And do that intentionally over an extended period of time. And if you and your spouse can agree to do that, man, that's a huge step. Otherwise, what you're doing is you're arguing and fighting and disagreeing over wants and desires and interests. And if you just agree that we want to experience financial freedom, we want to honor God with our finances, you'll be able to look back someday and say, we did it right. Well, those are my thoughts on money today. What are yours? What have you learned? What are you going through? Maybe you have a suggestion that you'd like to offer on our comments right below. I'd love to hear them. I'm Randy, here at my home today. I'll be back again tomorrow with some more thoughts on another topic. If you have something you'd like me to talk about, let me know. If there's a discussion on some aspect of your life or what you're experiencing, you'd like to know how intentional living principles work, I'd love to share them. Just let me know below. So have a great day, be safe, and I'll see you next time.